contractors. I say to this guy, grow a pair, talk to the people like human beings, and don't be so quick to bomb people with drones instead of having a coherent foreign policy. Grow up.
Let's expand on that more, great sir. I mean, one of the biggest areas is, well, they call it defense, really, but in some sense it should be called offense, because the U.S., let's look at some of the announcements they have made. Their actual deployment of its troops to 35 African nations, and that, in some sense, is to counter China's influence. And that's as early as next year they're going to do that. For that matter, of course, their increase in Central Asia, and on last count, the U.S. military, well, they're deployed in 150 countries around the world. Shouldn't this area be on the chopping block?
Well, of course it should be, but the reason why it's not is obvious. I think it's self-evident, in fact, that Obama, just like Bush and Clinton and Bush and Reagan and all of the presidents before them, going back 2 generations, are beholden to the interests on Wall Street as well as the interests within the military-industrial complex. If you notice this fiscal deal, we see no significant cuts to the military budget. We see no change in tack from this imperialist agenda in Syria, in Africa, as you mentioned, and elsewhere. And it's important to remember also that President Obama is pretty much the most successful president in terms of selling war to the American people, and in particular selling out those who call themselves Obama supporters, those who make up his base. We see no conversation from Obama during the election or after regarding the issues of poverty, or really regarding actual substantive solutions to problems like unemployment. And again, I want to come back to the deal that was struck here. We should remember that the propaganda, the rhetoric is saying that we have no tax increases on the middle class, when in fact this is a lie. This is a propaganda ploy. The fact that they allowed the payroll tax holiday to expire means in effect that middle class people, those who are wage earners, are going to lose money directly out of their paychecks. So as I mentioned earlier, this is an illusion. It is an illusory solution to this problem. And just as we see with the sequestration issue, military spending, the Pentagon budget, and so forth, these will not be cut to any significant degree. Those programs that will be cut, will be gouged by Obama, will be things like food stamps, Medicare, and the other social programs which many people in this country truly depend on. And I choose not to get involved in these economic abstractions. I much prefer to talk about economic realism. Those 50 million people in the United States who are very much subject to these programs and whose lives are very much dependent on them, they need them to survive. And Obama, just like his Republican collaborators, has no interest in supporting them or in creating any kind of solutions. And it's for that reason that Obama is the perfect representative of Wall Street and London and international neoliberal capitalism.
Well, Max Keiser, since our guest there talked about how the media and print media is portraying this, was interesting how this was presented to the media. I mean, the White House gave no particular figures for how much it would bring down the deficit, stating only that somehow with a strengthening economy that it would. Why wouldn't they release figures? And of course, more importantly, does U.S.'s economic data support a flourishing economy to come?
Well, we've already talked about the reason why, because the media in America is corporate-owned, and it is pretty much taking their direction from the White House. Certainly an outlet like Fox News takes its marching orders directly from the Pentagon and the White House. The Fox News is a state-run media outlet in all but name. And this is a funny figure that they came up with, that the taxes rates are going to go up for people making over $400,000 or $450,000. Of course, because of the money printing necessary to keep the debts intact going forward, a lot of people will start to make $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year. It's called inflation. And but of course, a cup of coffee will cost $100,000, and a cost of an education will cost several $1,000,000, because that's what happens in a hyperinflationary economy like the U.S. is heading into, because they're letting the debts expand exponentially. And the Federal Reserve Bank, they have a remit now, as all the G7 nations have signed on to this idea, that they can simply print billions. And in the case of Japan, they're going to